Welcome everyone to Let's Talk Migraine. We're really excited to be here today. And today we're going to be talking about some of the hottest topics faced by people who live with this disabling and complex neurological disorder that affects nearly 40 million people in the US and 1 billion globally. So my name is Shoshana Lipson, and I want to give a special welcome to our patient advocate panel, Erin Atkinson, Marina Medved-Lentini from Parenting with Migraine, and Erica Carrasco from Achy Smile. All four of us live with migraine, but we want to remind you that nothing we say here should be taken as medical advice. We are speaking purely from our own experience and encourage you to partner with your doctor in any medical decisions. Today, we're going to be talking about navigating the 4 phases of migraine attacks. That's prodrome, aura, acute or the headache phase, and post-drome. As with anything migraine, this is a really complex topic. The phases often overlap. Not every person experiences all phases, and not every attack follows the same pattern for each person. However, it can help with migraine management to have a basic understanding of these phases. So let's jump right in. We're going to start with the prodrome phase, which is the very beginning of a migraine attack. But unfortunately, people with migraine often aren't aware of their symptoms during this phase. But knowing them is really important. So Marina, let's start out with you. What kind of symptoms do you have during prodrome?
Hi, Shoshana. Thank you. So my symptoms during prodrome are irritability and fatigue. And we're all different. So other people may include yawning, increased need to urinate, food craving, sensitivity to light and sound, difficulty concentrate, nausea. When I have irritability, it's a big one. You know, we all have, I have chronic migraine, and I get attacks often. So that means I'm irritable all the time. And my husband can attest to that. So he often says that he'll ask me, how's the weather? And I'll bark that it's sunny. And so he tells everybody that. Another symptom that I get is fatigue, and it comes on strong. I will be sitting on the couch, and all of a sudden I'll get this need to just lay down and nap. And it took me a long time to figure out that it was part of prodrome. I thought that I was getting a migraine attack because I was napping during the day. I thought that was triggering a migraine attack. And then I finally figured out that it was actually part of prodrome, and I would just be sitting down and I just need to lay down and close my eyes. So those are mine.
Yeah, that's really interesting and just kind of highlights how many different things are going on at the same time during the prodrome phase. And that's just for you. So let's go on to Erin. You know, what is the prodrome like for you? And do you have any tips for stopping this phase from progressing to the next phase, or have you not figured that out yet?
Thank you for that, Shoshana. I'm still navigating through that myself. I know that I do experience fatigue, yawning, irritability, sugar cravings. I'll get a really hefty craving for like dark chocolate or something just really, really sweet. And I haven't quite tracked all of them yet because it's an ever-changing condition. And it changes throughout our lives. One of the things that I have done is a lot of times I will go for some salted crackers to help calm down some of the nausea, and just kind of laying down, taking it easy. I might throw on an ice pack if it feels like it's something that's going to help. So it's kind of navigating through the different symptoms that we have,
right,
in that prodrome, excuse me.
Absolutely. What about you, Erica? I know that you've told me recently, we were chatting yesterday, that sometimes it's like everything all happens at once. Are you ever able to figure out what part is the prodrome, or is that just impossible?
No, I do have attacks where I do have prodrome, so it's a very odd one for me. I get really hungry all of a sudden, and it's like hunger, like it's intense, and I have to eat because if I don't eat right away, I will have a migraine attack. And it's strange because it's just like Erin, I need like something high in sugar or something very carby. And that's how I know usually that this is probably migraine related, because it's not like your regular like hunger, like, oh, I just need to eat something. This is like, you have to eat something now. You're going to have a migraine or pass out. And it is that urgent in that moment. At least it feels like it. And then I'll have fatigue, just like Marina and Aaron said. My fatigue is like really bad too. Like Marina, I have chronic migraine. And so like that is one thing that I do battle is the fatigue. And I still haven't quite figured that out, but I do know it's also linked to my sleep. I figured out I'm not getting enough sleep at night. And so it's just like this cycle. I'm not sleeping enough. So then I have this really strong fatigue, and then that leads to a headache or a migraine. And, sometimes I have migraine attacks without the headache. And so sometimes it's just difficult to know, like, is this a prodrome symptom or is it something else? It can be confusing.
Yeah, it can be really complicated. And I know for myself that I have, like most other people, I have lots of different types of attacks. Like I woke up with one at 5:30 this morning. Those are like the dreaded ones that kind of wake you up out of your sleep, right? So the prodrome is like long past, who knows when that happened, but you're stumbling around trying to even, see where your medications are because everything is too bright and movement hurts. But for me, other times if I get an attack during the day, a lot of the time I'll yawn a lot, like Marina mentioned. And it's kind of embarrassing because if someone's talking, I'm just sitting there yawning and yawning and yawning. So I had to say, I'm sorry, I'm not being rude. I'm not bored by you. I may have a migraine attack coming because the yawning is just like constant. And the other thing I often have in prodrome, like the day before, is I become like the Energizer bunny. Like literally I get so much done. And I used to think that it was because I overdid stuff that then I was causing the attack to come. But now I understand my prodrome. I realize that's part of my prodrome. I have tons and tons of energy. So now I kind of lean into it and take advantage of it because I know that I could be out for the next few days. So during that Energizer bunny phase, which is my prodrome, I'll just do as much as I can because I know that, I may not be able to do it the next day or the day after. So that's kind of some of my prodrome. One of the questions that I think is kind of interesting is, if you can predict when you're in prodrome, at least some of the time, then, there is some evidence or at least some medications. For example, there is one of the new CGRP pants. There's some evidence that if you treat it, the prodrome, during the prodrome phase, then you actually may be able to stop the migraine attack progressing to the attack phase or to the acute or the headache phase, which is kind of interesting. So, Marina, are you able to accurately predict at least some of the time when you're in prodrome? And if so, do you pre-treat or do you wait until you're just really feeling awful?
So when I don't pass out and fall asleep from the fatigue, I usually just reach for my neuromodulation device and do a session, or I rest for a bit, do meditation, try to relax and, just hope for the best. I don't tend to pre-treat unless I have an event coming up and I know that I have somewhere to be. If I know I'm going to be home, I don't pre-treat with medication, but this is such a great idea. And I like that if it's anti-CGRP medication, that means that we're not prone to rebound if we take them, because that's always my concern. Yeah, I usually wait when I actually have the attack phase to take medication.
Yeah, that's interesting. I just heard about it at the AHS conference I was at in June in Austin, where there was a talk actually being given by Dr. Stuart Tepper about this whole topic. And it made me rethink and realize I really do need to know when I'm in prodrome, and I can not only know when I'm in it, but then, there are situations, excuse me, when I may pre-treat, like you said, Marina, if I have an event coming up, or if I was, doing an event like this or traveling, I may pre-treat as well, especially with a medication that doesn't cause medication overuse headache or medication adaptation headache, as long as you have enough medication.
And I was just going to say that for those of us with chronic migraine and high frequency migraine, we're limited in the medications we get. Yeah. And what if the attack comes back and, you still have migraine attacks to treat? Yeah. So, it's a conundrum.
It totally is a conundrum. You're absolutely right. And I think that's something that everybody with migraine relates to is that, what do you do? Should I take this medication? Should I not? Do I risk the side effects? Do I risk running out of medication? Is this attack really going to progress? It's like we go through this complex algorithm in our heads that then determines how we're going to behave in our rituals. So let's get a little bit more into our rituals. We're going to talk about the aura phase. And just to remind people, not everybody has aura. And these phases aren't necessarily sequential. So it may not be your prodrome, then aura, and then your acute phase and then the post-drome. They overlap. They can go backwards and forwards, to some extent as well. It's, again, like everything migraine, it's complex. But for those people who do have aura, and that's at least 3 of us here, let's talk about that a little bit, because it's not just the typical light disturbances. So let's start with you, Aaron. What type of aura do you experience? What is that like for you?
Well, I will get. I used to call them sparklers when I was younger, but little flashes of lights in my eyes, and sometimes I'll get these little. I used to call them amoebas. They're like these little weird shapes, like translucent shapes, and it's the weirdest thing in the world. So that's usually an indicator that I need to take it slow. I need to be careful what I'm eating. Make sure that I'm avoiding as many triggers as possible, because that could be an indicator that I might be having a full-on attack coming on. So it's an interesting thing to watch out for. It's you learn to live with it and kind of work through it, but it's still peculiar.
Yeah. You actually brought up something very interesting about triggers, because we know that triggers to some extent can stack. So if you know you're in prodrome, or if you know that you're getting an aura, that may be the time to reduce your triggers. For example, if you know bright light is a big trigger for you, that may not be at the time you want to go down to the beach, right? Or if you know stents are a big trigger and you're already in prodrome or you're having aura, maybe don't walk around a department store where you're going to be smothered with perfume and cologne. So that's kind of one of the ways it's helpful. What about you, Erica? Let's talk about the oddest aura that you've ever experienced.
Well, I have had the amoebas. But I would say the oddest aura I've had is Alice in Wonderland syndrome. And I've had it on a few occasions. I haven't had it in a while, thankfully, because it is a very bizarre experience. For me, when I had it, I was telling my husband, I was like, your head is growing. You look like an alien. And the walls were moving, and I felt really strange. All of the colors, like yellows, greens, and reds, were extremely bright. And then I was and then I was laughing uncontrollably. So of course my kids were little. They were, 7, 8 years old probably. They were laughing right along with me because they thought it was the funniest thing ever. I could not stop laughing. And, I was terrified because the first time I didn't know what was happening. I wanted to cry. I was terrified, but I was laughing so hard, and my kids were laughing. And Steven, though, was like, what is happening? Like, he was absolutely terrified.
That sounds so scary, Erica.
It really was. Yeah. But I had to laugh it off because my kids were so young, I didn't want to scare them. And so we made an appointment with the doctor right away, found out what was going on, and then we were able to kind of breathe easy, knowing that it was migraine aura, because the head pain came afterwards. So the next time it happened, we already knew what to expect, and we honestly were able to all laugh through it without the terrifying feelings of it. It happened about 4 times in my career of migraine. So, so that's the oddest aura I've ever experienced.
Yeah, I mean, aura can be really, really scary. We've seen, sometimes you see famous people on the news, they'll be talking about it, what happens as well. I have a very close family member who loses their vision, and so if that happens, they're going to obviously pull. If they're driving, they're in trouble. They're going to pull over. For myself, and that's like super scary when that happens. For myself, the only thing I ever get is Alice in Wonderland. I haven't actually had it for a couple of years now, which is it's good and it's bad. It's bad because it was like a warning to me, but it's good because it's really bizarre. But I started getting Alice in Wonderland really early childhood. And honestly, I thought it was normal. I thought everybody experienced this because it wasn't scary. But I thought this was normal. This is what happened to my eyes. And for me, Alice in Wonderland has all sorts of different ways that it presents. But for me, everybody got really tiny and far off. So it's like I was looking down a tube and you were like really, really, really tiny. And that was just the way that I thought normal vision was, because it happens so frequently until, not so long ago, I discovered Alice in Wonderland. I'm like, ooh, that's what I get. And of course, the pain part, happens after it. So that's definitely the weirdest aura for me. Now, Marina, I don't think you experience aura, right? So for you, what would be the earliest symptoms of the acute phase?
I'm actually experiencing them right now. So, hello.
So sorry.
I'm the problem. It's me.
Mhm.
At the early stage, I experienced neck pain and stiffness. So I have chronic neck pain. But during a migraine attack, my neck pain gets much worse. So it's the back of my head. And I experienced tingling in my temples, kind of like, like very, very faint. And then it gets stronger and stronger, and then it turns into pain in my head. And sometimes it takes about an hour to start up, and sometimes it's much faster, and mostly like pressure, in my head. Um, and light sensitivity, noise sensitivity. My kids sound really loud, and of course, irritability. Irritability is just constant part of the game. Everybody's loud and
Yeah.
obnoxious. But yeah, so those are the beginning. That's the beginning for me.
Yeah, I know. My husband says that to me as well when I'm really grumpy. It's like, you got a migraine.
That's what my
Like,
husband said. And when
seriously,
I
just
say no, and when I say
yes.
no, he's like, okay, that's how we know
Yeah.
it's prodrome.
Yeah, absolutely. So just for
Which
those who
you
are
will.
wondering, yes, which you
Oh,
do,
yeah.
right? So for those who are wondering, often this is called the attack phase, but it doesn't really make sense to say the attack phase of the attack. So
Right.
there was an article that came out recently by Miles for Migraine, which we're going to put a link to in the comments. It's a really great article, which also kind of highlights the fact that stuff overlaps. It's not necessarily sequential, but they called this phase the acute phase. And I love that because this is kind of where everything is just going wrong. It's like your whole body is involved in this now. So it's the acute phase. It's also could be called the headache phase, although not everybody with migraine experiences headaches. So I personally like the term acute phase. So let's go to you, Aaron. What are some of the typical symptoms for you during the acute phase? And is it a whole body experience for you?
Well, if I can for a second, I wanted to go back to I think maybe it was the aura. I failed to
Sure.
mention aphasia. A lot of people experience aphasia,
Yes.
and when you mention celebrities or people that are on television, a
Yeah.
lot of times you can get aphasia. So, as
Yeah.
far as
Thank you
the
for mentioning that.
it's important because a lot of times people will confuse that with like a stroke or
Right.
it's important to check out with your doctor if that's something that's new for you. For me,
Yeah.
aphasia is something I've dealt with off and on for the last probably 6 years. Scary, but once you get used to it, you kind of understand it. But as far as the acute phase goes, it really depends on I guess the attack that I'm in. Depends on how my body's going to respond to it. Sometimes I get the whole body experience, and I've ended up in the ER before because you get stuck in a cycle where you just can't stop, getting ill. Sometimes it's just a touch of nausea, vertigo. I get vertigo with almost every attack. Sometimes it's worse than others, so I'm constantly making sure I've got something to reach out to hold on to, so I can kind of center my body again, so that I can feel upright. Um, but it really depends on the attack. Sometimes there is no headache, and it's the you get like the stomach issues, you get the nausea, you get the vertigo, but there's no head pain. I prefer those because the head pain is just excruciating for me sometimes. I also have cluster headaches, so sometimes that overlaps, so it makes it kind of hard to decipher sometimes because it seems to like all overlap, with the symptoms and everything. So I guess it just really depends on the attack.
Right.
It's all
Yeah,
different.
absolutely. Thank you. Appreciate you sharing that.
Yeah.
And I know that you, Erica, have some really different types of migraine attacks as well. And sometimes it's very scary. So,
Right.
what is an attack? What is the phase? What is the acute phase? See, I'm messing up my terminology here now as well. What is the acute phase like for you, and how do you manage that?
It's actually a lot like Aaron. So I have different types of migraine. So first I have to determine what type of migraine attack am I having. So is it
Right.
a hemiplegic migraine? Is it a migraine with brainstem aura? Is it a vestibular migraine? Is it a migraine without a headache? Like I have so many different types. So first I have to determine. But once I've done that, a lot of times I have to decide, do I need to take my meds right now? Most of the time I do. And I will. I'll go and I'll get my ice cap that I have. I'll put on
Right.
my migraine glasses. I will go and get, if I can handle scent, I will go get my migraine stick so I can smell the essential oils because it helps with nausea or anything like that. I will also take a hot shower if my neck and my back are affected. I'll do like green light therapy while I'm in the tub. So kind of just doing all these things all at one time. I put ice on my shoulders. And then I feel like the hot shower and then the ice therapy, that combo helps a lot.
Right.
I can't do like a heating pad. It's not enough. I need like hot water. And then sleep. Like I just sleep through if it's, that, because it's like, it's on a spectrum. So I can have really tolerable attacks and then I can have just disabling attacks that I can't do anything. So, the dark room and like all the classic stuff people do to try to make it through an attack. I do all of that too.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's interesting you talk about, sometimes you have to stop and sometimes you don't. I was thinking that, I have attacks that are just there. I just, for me, it's just a nightmare. And I live in fear of going into those attacks. I'm very, very aggressive in my treatments. But then there are attacks that the pain level was just lower and maybe the nausea is lower. But if a lower level attack lasts for day after day after day, my tolerance to it goes down as well. I don't know if that's true for the rest of you as well. Okay, cool. I always quite like, like day 3, I'm just done. I just can't cope anymore. Yes, it's terrible. And so it's, I wish we could say again, it was simple. The higher the pain level, the more you treat, but it's not. It varies on so much. So let's go to you, Marina. What kind of rituals do you have during the acute phase? And does it kind of depend? You're a parent with young children. So my children are out of the house now. So I have a little bit more flexibility in how I treat my attacks. But does it depend on different factors like severity of symptoms, types of symptoms, triggers, or your responsibilities as a parent on that particular day?
Yeah, so luckily I have only one type of migraine, after hearing Erica and Aaron, just have one, but it's enough. Okay, one is enough. But I do have different levels of severity. And what my family and I do, we use the traffic light system when it comes to my migraine attacks.
Okay.
And it's easy for my kids to understand. So if my kids always ask me, what color are you? And, and I tell them it's red. That means that I am down. If it's yellow, that means I am able to function, but everything's slowed down. If it's green, that means I am, I'm still experiencing symptoms, but I am able to, do everything. And of course, their favorite is the white day, which is I have no symptoms. So when it's a green day, then I'm having low symptoms day, and I'm not limited by my activities, so I can, I'm still having symptoms, but I can, use a neuromodulation device just to make sure my symptoms don't progress. I wear my migraine glasses. So there's not that much migraine management that day. And my family is not impacted by my migraine that day. I can take my kids to somewhere. We can go places. I can still work without interruptions. But when it's a yellow day, I can possibly medicate. I use my neuromodulation device several times that day. I need to lay down throughout the day. May need help from my husband, my kids. I use my heating pad. I love my heating pad, Erica. Don't talk bad about my heating pad. When it's a red day, I just take out all my tools. It's just like everything. And over-the-counter meds, all the meds, and and I'm on the couch, I'm on the bed. My family needs to leave me alone. My husband needs to take the kids, and if he can't, then my poor kids just, we're just getting through it and doing the best we can,
Yeah. Absolutely.
And yeah, that's it.
It's hard. It's challenging. I remember when, so many memories, as a parent with 3 young kids, what do you do with them when you have a really bad attack? Especially, if you're married and your spouse isn't available, or if you're not married. Like I was a single mom for many years, and I had 2 sons with very severe migraine, including to myself. And we spent a lot of time where I was just lying on the couch, and they were playing video games, but silence. I couldn't hear it. You have to have things that they can do, but we live with a lot of guilt, right? As parents, with our
But
children.
you know what? All parents live with guilt. That's just part of the game. And yes,
Exactly.
because we have migraine and we have a chronic illness, we definitely have more guilt. But I always tell myself that no matter what, parents are just wired that way.
Yeah.
I will say that parents who have migraine and they have children, if they don't also have migraine, their children tend to grow up very empathetic. They're very good at treating people with respect and so caring. They're such caring people. My kids are adults now, and they're both so empathetic to other people.
Yeah.
And I think that's something that we can see as a good thing that comes out of this, in that our children are raised around someone who can't always care for themselves, so they know how to care for people.
Absolutely. I think they also learn how to troubleshoot as well, because they're watching their parents troubleshoot. Like my kids have watched me pivot into different types of careers and different things because I just can't do what I used to do. And, that's a good skill for kids to learn. So, I was going to say for my own attacks, I get, they vary in terms of intensity of pain, but if I don't treat it, then the intensity is, I know that migraine attacks are not generally called suicide headaches, but mine get severe enough that they really are suicide headaches for me. And so I live in fear of an attack getting that bad. And, fortunately, it hasn't happened for a while because I have some great doctors who give me great medication to have at home that I can use, but it can get really intense. I also slur my speech, so I sound like I am drunk. I lose my words, but the slurred speech is a really big deal for me because it's bizarre. And my husband will notice that even if I'm not really acting like I'm in pain, that my speech is slurred. I also get really, really fatigued, and when an attack has lasted more than a day, it affects my vision in terms of blurry vision. So it's like I'm not wearing my glasses, even though I am. And so it's very hard for me to read anything on my computer, read a book, or do anything because everything is super, super blurry, which is really freaky. And for me, that goes into the prodrome phase, which we'll talk about, in a little bit. I also get neck pain and brain fog, like, so many other people as well. But the acute phase to me can be pretty scary. How I manage it depends on what I have to do. So if I'm traveling, I will take as much medication as I need to in order to get through it. Most of the time I can because I have some really strong medication that my doctors prescribe for me. But if I'm at home, there's only so much medication you can take. Either you run out of it or you're concerned about side effects. So for me, I get a lot of GI side effects to my medication. So I'm always scared to take too much. But on the other hand, after you've lost a week or 2 weeks of time to an attack, you're like, okay, I'm just done with this. I'm going to take whatever I need to take. So it can be really hard. And then, of course, I have a medical device that I use as well right now. So if I can catch an attack early enough, I use that medical device. And often it will stop an attack for me, but I got to catch it within the first 30 minutes. So we're going to talk more about medical devices, not next time, but the time after. So make sure you come to that one because that's going to be an interesting topic. So the G-PANTs that are acute are Nurtec and Ubrelvy. There is also a preventive one called Qulipta, just to give fair airing time. And then, of course, the preventive monoclonal antibodies are Aimovig, Jovi, Emgality, and Vyepti. And then just to mention some other medications, again, there's Trudhesa, which is a nasal spray. There's Zavspret, which is the new medication that is a nasal spray. And then there's all the triptans, which I can never remember all their names, but rizatriptan, sumatriptan, provatriptan, and a whole ton more other triptans. But those are some of the most common medications that are used for acute treatment. And then for people who have very, very severe attacks, such as myself, your doctor may prescribe you a ketorolac or Toradol. You may get steroid tapers. You may have nerve blocks. You may use the devices as well. And the devices are Gammacore, Nerivio, Relivion, the Savidual, and Cephalate. So fair airing time for everybody. That's just kind of like a real brief rundown. But it was the G-PANTs that has been shown to, in some cases, help stop an attack progressing. And then just so you know, Erin, somebody mentioned here that they're super happy to see a guy doing this. And so, yes, we're all thrilled that Erin is here. So I am a mother of three sons. All three of them have migraine. So I'm very passionate about the fact this is not a woman's disease. I know that's true for you as well, Erica. So it's a big deal. Migraine is not just a women's disease. And actually talking about sons, before we go into prodrome, I was going to say that the way that I knew my oldest son first started getting migraine was he had no attacks until one day he said, "Flashy lights, mommy, flashy lights." And that's how I knew, oh my gosh, my son has migraine disease. So, and the pain started soon after that. So, Erin, I'm so glad that you're here. So let's go back to prodrome. And then I see there's one other live question come in, which if we have time, we will get to it. And it looks like we are because we're going pretty fast through this. So the prodrome is the last phase of an attack. And I should say that between the prodrome and the post-drome is the last phase of the attack. Between the post-drome and the prodrome is what's called interictal. So it's not necessarily a migraine attack, but it's that phase between attacks for those people who have time between attacks, as opposed to one long attack. So we're not going to get into the interictal phase today, but for the post-drome, people often think that once the pain is gone or the nausea and the vomiting is gone, that it's over and you should be able to function. So we think we should be able to function and other people do. Often not the case, as kind of a hangover effect. So Erin, let's go back to you again. Do you experience post-drome symptoms and do you ignore them, or do you tend to get, do you take care of them?
Well, it depends on the attack also. Sometimes the post-drome effects can last a couple of days. I just had a 2-day migraine where today I'm still kind of experiencing some post-drome, having trouble with my words a little bit, and just sluggish brain, foggy brain. So it really depends on how severe it is. If it's been a long attack, the post-drome might last longer for me. So I might try to push through it, but I still have to slow down because it might end up turning back into an attack again. So I have to feel it out. I have to feel, I just have to listen to my body in that kind of situation. So it really depends on that. Sometimes I can push right through it and it's fine. But sometimes it just comes right back if I push through without giving myself a chance to recover fully.
And it was interesting that you're saying that it can come back, and it's kind of symptomatic of what I was saying, that these phases, they don't necessarily go sequential, and sometimes they can go backwards. So Erica, does that happen to you? Do you get a prodrome, and if you kind of get up and going too quickly, it can go back into the acute phase, or is it pretty much once you're there, then you're kind of heading towards the end?
No, so sometimes my prodrome can last days, actually. It depends on how severe the attack itself was and kind of what triggered it. My prodrome can last 48, 72 hours. I've had it last weeks before, and I didn't have migraine, but I was completely run down. But typically they last about 24 hours. I have the hangover for about 24 hours, and I try not to do anything physical during that time. I can still do things. I can do computer work. I can work from my phone. I'll just either be laid out on my recliner or lay down the whole day. I don't really have to treat myself for anything. I just have to recover. So as long as I do a lot of self-care that day, the next day after that, I'm usually back to myself. But like I said, it really depends on how severe that attack was.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I love the phrase extreme self-care. I think I first heard it from Harry Smyers, and that really is a time where you need some extreme self-care. What about you, Marina? What is the post-drome like for you? And any tips on how to speed up the recovery from the migraine hangover, or is there no way that you're able to speed that up?
Yeah, I usually feel like Erica. I feel like I was run over by a truck. I just feel slower physically and mentally. I make sure I eat, drink, I take supplements, and I just take it slow. I work from the couch. I parent from the couch. And for the next day or two, I'm just slower in everything else I do until I, move on to the next stage.
Yeah.
I usually tell I usually tell my husband and my son, like, y'all have to feed me today because otherwise you're not going to eat. Like, I don't know what to tell you.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, and for me, the post-drome is fatigue, like everybody else. I have that blurry vision that just lasts, especially if I've had an attack that's gone on for 2 or more days. And I'm depressed as well. We haven't even really touched on the mental health aspects of attacks, but I definitely, I mean, first of all, it's depressing when you have an attack that lasts for day after day after day, and all the things you can't do, or the guilt you may feel, or the side effects you may be experiencing from treatments. But besides that, it also just, it changes your body. So that depression or the anxiety can come as part of the post-drome as well. And I definitely feel that for me, after the worst of the pain is gone, I'm like, wow, I got to catch up. I've got to get back, into advocacy. I've got to do all the things I was supposed to do. But what I'm learning is that it's worth my while taking my time to be kind to myself, to find things that will make me smile, whether it's like I love doing puzzles, or I do adult paint by numbers, or take a walk outside if it's not too hot or too cold or too windy or too anything, basically anything other than perfect. But basically anything that makes me smile, I'll read a book, I'll watch my stupid, Hallmark movies that just kind of make me smile, sappy things I don't have to focus on. So that's where I really need to make sure that I take care of myself. Otherwise, I'm not able to get up and running again, which kind of brings me to one of the live questions that we got is, how do we get others to understand what we're going through during the migraine attacks? Like, people may or may not understand the acute phase. If we're in really severe agony, then it's kind of easier for them to understand that. But how do we explain to them about the post-drome, especially that the acute phase may be over, but we're still in a migraine attack? Any thoughts about that? I'm just going to open that up to whoever has an idea on that.
I mean, I'm just like, I can't life today. It's just leave me alone. So how, like, Marina, you were saying, like, you're really irritable. I can be really irritable in post-drome too. Because
all the stages.
So like for me, that's where I'm usually irritable. So because I'm kind of upset, like the whole mental health. I'm depressed. I'm upset, depending on how long the attack lasted. And so I'm just like, I just kind of leave me alone. I'm going to go read. That's my to-do when I'm not feeling well. I read. I think I read almost 365 books in 1 year because I was in so much pain that year. Yeah. So like reading is my thing. And so that's just kind of what I go through to try to get through it during post-drome. And
yeah, absolutely.
One thing I would say,
if I answered your question.
If you can take your family member, your spouse, or your parent, or to a doctor appointment with you, I feel like that would help them understand what you're going through better than any graphic or a blog or an article. It's something that I started doing with my husband, and I feel like that was the best thing that we have done for our marriage or for our migraine journey. He now better understands my treatments, my migraine, what I'm going through. And I really highly recommend it because now he's more involved and just really better understands how, like the things that's hard to explain, like the part that's hard to explain about migraine, like when you talk to your doctor about what do I do next, that the frustration that you feel. And so I would recommend that other than,
Yeah, no, that's a great idea, and you're right. I mean, some people watch the videos, some people, like one of the things we're going to do with this is make little short clips, out of the long recording. There'll be some people that watch that. There'll be some people that will look at a meme. But I think having that personal touch, like taking them to a doctor. So someone else is telling your loved one about what an attack is like. So they're no longer thinking, oh, that's just my wife, right? She's emotional or whatever, because there's so much stigma about migraine. So when you hear a doctor say, no, that's normal. It's normal for someone to be exhausted and to have brain fog. It's not an excuse. it's actually real. It's normal for them to get depressed, to have anxiety. I think that's a great idea, Marina. I really
And
appreciate you sharing that.
to see, for them to see your doctor take you
Yep,
seriously, that
yep,
is, if you have a doctor who takes you seriously,
yep,
also helps them view you and your disease more
yep.
seriously.
Right, and taking
Absolutely.
your migraine diary with you if you keep track,
Yes. Yeah,
that's
definitely.
also really helpful.
Yeah. What about you, Erin? What thoughts do you have about, how are you able to help people understand what migraine's like for you?
Well, most people that are, I guess, in my inner circle know that I experience migraine attacks. So I usually will just say, "Sorry, I've got migraine brain." I just kind of, if I'm feeling off, or if I'm coming across grumpy, or I just, if I know that I'm displaying symptoms, then I try to
Yeah.
excuse it quickly as, sorry, migraine brain, or I'm at a level 5 today, or whatever. I use a number scale, which I like
Yeah.
Marina's the traffic light scale. That might be a little simpler than
Yeah.
10 numbers, but yeah, I don't really talk about it to a lot of people. I'm self-employed, and I work with a lot of different people, different places. So
Right.
unless it's something that I need to make them aware of, that I feel like I'm gonna, if I'm in one of the phases where it might affect my ability to do my job,
Mhm.
I don't really talk about it as much. I try to use this type of platform really to talk about it
Sure.
more, because honestly, for a long time, I got really tired of hearing myself talk, and it was almost kind of negative self-talk. To touch a little bit on the mental health thing,
Right.
you talk about all the bad stuff about it, and so I
Right.
did it so much that I felt like
Mhm.
sometimes I was bringing on or inviting an attack to come on. So I try to
Yeah.
limit my limit the amount of time that I speak on it unnecessarily, I guess.
No, I get that. I totally understand. Sometimes I just don't want to talk about it.
Yeah.
But I like the number system as well. Like this morning when I woke up at 5:30, my husband was like, "Is it a 5? Is it a 6?" I'm like, "No, it's an 8. It's an 8." He's like, "What?" And so he understands that. He knows that by the time I'm at a 7, I'm taking medication. And at an 8, I'm in bad shape. At 9, you can forget it. And he has never seen me in a 10, at least not for many, many, many years. So it's the different systems work for different people, but I think being able to communicate that is really important. We did get a comment here about, does any of you get a feeling of euphoria in prodrome? That's kind of me, with my Energizer bunny. I feel very, very happy during, not all the time, but sometimes in the prodrome when I'm like an Energizer bunny, I do have that euphoria. So then there was a comment here that said, "Thank you, panel, for your time today. You are heroes to the migraine community." So whoever wrote that, thank you. It's really encouraging for us to hear things like that. I think there are many times when we don't feel like heroes, right? It's like, I mean, who here had a migraine today? So I did, and it's just kind of muted by drugs. I know Marina did. Erica, did you have a migraine attack today?
Yeah, I'm actually having
Yesterday?
one now, but
Yeah.
it's like really low level, so
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
yeah.
And Erin, you're just coming off a
Yeah.
migraine attack or trying to come off it. So we don't feel like heroes. But I think one of the most important things that I've learned for myself is that when I use what is going on in my life in terms of migraine for good, like if I'm turning around and use it to help people, then it helps me not to think about how crappy I feel, which is actually a way that I manage migraine, is to know that I'm using it for good. And so if we inspire anybody else to do that, then I think that would be the greatest thing, is that, it's easy to sit and think, well, my life is awful. I'm in so much pain. I'm taking so much medication. There's so much I can't do. But there are things that we can do. And so when we take that control back by doing things like this, or by figuring out our prodrome and our post-drome, that's taking that control back. And I think that's really important. So we're going to close today with one final thought from each person. So on this topic, why don't we start with you, Erin? 1 to 3 sentences. What is your final thought on this topic of the phases of migraine attacks?
Oh, 1 to 3 sentences. All right, that's the first one. So I think just listening to your body and knowing what works for you, paying attention to what phase you're in, or trying to narrow that down so that you can take medication that is going to help you either have to stop the attack, or at least minimize the attack. Yeah.
Absolutely. Thank you. And Erica.
I would say sometimes it's really tough to know where the phase symptoms belongs, like where the symptom belongs in the phase. It's possible for symptoms to cross phases or happen almost all at once, like it does for me. Like, we're all different. So your best resource would be to talk to your headache specialist. They'd be the person to be able to tell you, what you're experiencing and how each experience, kind of tailor your medication or your ritual to help you get through an attack.
Absolutely. Thank you. And Marina.
Treat yourself with compassion as you go through these stages. For those of us with chronic and high frequency migraine, we're constantly cycling through a migraine attack. And it's so hard on our bodies physically and emotionally. So be kind to yourself.
I love that. And my final thought would be is that migraine disease takes so much away from us. It takes so much control out of our lives. And so when we learn about the disease and we learn about how it presents in us and how we can best treat it and manage it, that gives us some control back. And that's a good thing. It's empowering to be able to do that. So thank you, everybody, for attending today. Thank you again to Erica, Marina, and Aaron. Thank you again to our sponsors for making this possible. And for everybody who's watching this, if you or a loved one lives with migraine, we know that the impact on life can be huge. And so we encourage you to explore our website for current evidence-based information. Talk to your headache specialist about how migraine is impacting your life, and connect with others who understand so that you can find the support you need. Thank you for joining us today. Thank you again to everybody here, and have a great day, and goodbye.
Thank you.